clock 7:03. Let's call the Police Advisory Board meeting to order. And with that, we'll have the roll call. Angie, are you there?
I am. Good evening, everybody. All right. Chair Lohman?
Here.
Vice Chair Foster?
Here.
Brian Dorsey? No.
Present.
Rich Miller?
Here.
Bob Silverford?
Here.
Mike Smith?
Here.
Megan Thornton?
Here. Sorry, I had troubles with Teams.
Oh, no worries. Chris West?
Present.
And Lori Zwingli?
Here.
All right, very good. Thank you, everybody.
How about Counselor Young? Is she with us?
Yes, she is.
Okay. And we have the chief and we have Angie. We have a full complement tonight. Wow. Okay, let's go on to approval of the minutes. Have we had an opportunity to look at those? Bob, I'll look to you as I usually do.
I did.
You have a fine-tooth comb.
They're getting longer all the time with all of these policies. But so it's a lengthy process, but I did go through all of them and they look terrific. As always, Angie did a nice job and I move that the minutes be approved as submitted.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. And Angie, when you have those ready, just give me a buzz and I can swing by and sign them for you.
I absolutely will. Thank you.
Okay. Board member announcements. So let's start with Diane Foster. Do you have anything for us, Diane?
No, not really tonight. Only fun thing on my agenda is after this call, I get to do a forensics lab with my high schooler, so that'll be fun.
Okay. That should be fun. Brian, how about you? Anything to contribute to the good of the cause tonight?
Yes, a couple of things. First of all, on Sunday morning, as Chris reminded me, we were awakened, my wife and I, by a number of emergency vehicles going by our house on Willow and turning down on Shady Grove. There was a incident involving some young folks, and I think the thing I was proud of was to see the Tualatin team supporting Sherwood. We had a lighter crew, and we had 4 Tualatin officers there doing a phenomenal job. Keeping an eye, controlling, talking with the different witnesses, and I had a chance to talk to a couple of them, and they just spoke very highly of the Sherwood crew that supports them in Tualatin and how proud they are and jumped the opportunity to help us here. But they did a wonderful job in keeping things moving as far as the investigation and dealing with the young people as they were being questioned, if you will. And I was just really happy to see that cooperation amongst the two. It was really a beautiful thing.
Anything else?
Also, yeah, I had the opportunity to speak with the SPD. About 12 of them, I think, were present, if I'm not mistaken. Myself and Jimmy Godard, we have just discussions about a little bit about ourselves and our story, and just really ways that we appreciated and ways that we felt that the police department can continue to do the great job they are in really connecting with the community, people groups within the community, and just to get a sense from them of how they're feeling and ask a few questions, and they were responsive. I think the biggest takeaway for me is that they need as much support from us as we need, and to really have their backs and to make sure we're there for them. If they have questions, if they need support, if they need support, just again, the imperative to really support them in every way we possibly can. It was a pleasure to meet all of them. I've met, and I'll be going back next Wednesday to meet some more. So it was a great coming together.
Good. Thank you. We'll hear from hairless Rich Miller now. Or beardless Rich Miller.
Okay. I just want to mention we're heading into the holiday season, and I wanted to remind Chief Growth and Angie to feel free to reach out to us, not only my church, but our church community, as this is a time of year when people seem to have more needs than other times of year. Also, if you're a person of faith, just to remind you to be praying for our officers. We have the election coming up, and I don't see things. I see some of the discord that we're experiencing as a society being elevated over the next 3 weeks, and that means our police officers are going to be more probably more impacted by some of the activity, and it may not happen in our town. I'm hoping it doesn't happen in Sherwood, but so if you're a person of faith, just keep them in your prayers.
Okay. Thanks, Rich. Bob, anything for us tonight?
Yeah, just one or two things. I had the opportunity last night to hear a presentation by Chief McAlpin of the Tigard Police Department. My wife is a member of the American Association of University Women, AAUW, and they asked her to be the speaker for their meeting. And so Judy asked me if I'd like to stop by or sit in to hear her talk, and I took that opportunity to hear her. She gave a terrific presentation. It was interesting to hear all the things they're doing in Tigard. And one thing that I just want to mention that he gives regular talks that she calls Chat with the Chief on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook. I didn't know you could do this on Facebook, but evidently you can. And she does that. In a recent talk, over 600 people were on there listening to her. Wow. So just a thought that I don't know whether we would ever do that, Chief, but I guess it's there if one wanted to do it. She also talked a little bit about the officers there, and that they're requiring, all have gone through it, requiring that each officer take 40 hours of training on mental health and how to deal with the problems that people have. At any rate, it was a great opportunity to hear what a city close to us is doing. And I just want to also jump on what Rich said. I had a question. I read that what a lot of different cities are doing to prepare for possible protests, demonstrations, etc., on November 3rd or after the election. And I was just curious as to what we in Sherwood are doing to prepare our officers. So maybe you want to address that, Chief, later on. Maybe that's going to come up, but I find that interesting to read about. That's it, Ralph.
Okay. Chief, you want to respond to that or wait till later or what?
No, I'd prefer to respond to it now. And my answer seems almost repetitive, but we keep our ear to the ground, so to speak, and listen to get any intelligence about anything that might be happening locally, and then we plan accordingly. So we kind of always have plans in the can, if you will, and we can freshen them up for the unique event or potential incident. Make sure we have appropriate staffing, make sure we have connections with other communities and other resources that we may need. So we are, I dare say, never caught off guard, and certainly this is going to be no different than any other time when we've actually had specific information or information about a potential incident. Sometimes they happen, sometimes they don't. So at this point, I have no information, no reason to believe that there's anything unique or specific planned for Sherwood. And certainly on any election, no matter the level or what, there's going to be people whose candidate won, and there's going to be people whose candidate lost. And of course, our hope is that when your candidate wins, you celebrate as a good winner, and when your candidate doesn't win, you take it in stride as a good loser, just to use terminology that we're all familiar with in sports. Obviously, it's not a good analogy because there's no winners or losers per se, but anyway, so that's really, I think, kind of part and parcel to the message that I've been sending out in the Archer, and then also posted generically on our Facebook page, is to just get along and show some compassion and humility. And so, but specifically to your question, Ralph, yeah, we'll be ready if we have any indication or any hint that there's anything going to happen in town.
Okay. Thanks, Chief. Mike, you're up.
A couple things. Bob, I actually may have met your wife before I met you, because when I was working, we booked a number of American Association of University Women conferences into Portland. So I may have met her in the past. I think
Probably
I mentioned, probably have. I think I mentioned to all of you that I'm currently going through the FBI Citizens Academy course, which is really interesting. Our presentation next week is from a psychologist back in DC on serial killers. So I'm just hoping I don't see any of your faces on the PowerPoint. That's all I just want to say about that. And then the most important thing, I got this today. It gets dropped off tomorrow. So that's all I got.
Okay. Yes, vote. I don't care how you vote, but vote. Because if you don't have any room to complain. Megan. You're up.
Hi, I'm up. Hi. I finally figured out life is better at home when I do meetings on the couch with headphones. It only took 7 months. So I had a couple things. Hopefully I remember the second by the time I'm done with the first. And that is, okay, we can show a multi. I guess I have 3 things. He wants you to see our doggy, who shouldn't be on the couch, but is on the couch. Yeah, that one. And then, speaking of doggies, we met with Irma in between our last meeting and tonight with another friend, and it was so, well, educational for me, but it was super fun for Parker. And I was just thinking it'd be great if we could, I did remember, between Chief's face and Irma, it came to me. Thank you, Chief. I haven't been drinking. This is just me on, me. So she was so fun, and watching her go after that arm guard, I know you know what I'm talking about, Chief, is impressive and scary. And I was just thinking, in a time of COVID where we have to be socially distanced, but we still want to do, and this was my second idea, still do coffee with a cop type events and promote the goodwill of the SPD, then maybe there could be some way where, we advertise that Irma's going to be somewhere, and, kids can come watch and do a little, pardon the pun, dog and pony with her. Let the kids pet her and, show her doing the arm guard thing. I don't know. I was just thinking, we need the goodwill of all police nationally right now, and citizenry more than ever. And I mean, as your officer friendly article talked about, why not maybe throwing in something with a dog makes everything work better. So that was the thought.
Okay.
I think I'm done.
Okay.
Mom, can you show the one thing this right now?
Chris.
Thanks, Ralph. I'm going to follow up with the stuff that Brian mentioned. Our bedroom is on the back side, so we didn't wake up at 3 a.m. with all the first responders roaring down our street. But when I got up at 6 and opened the garage to load stuff up to go to Tri-County for a match, there was lights flashing and yellow tape in the street. And I had some conversations with some neighbors and saw some parents try and come to pick up their young people that I saw the officers deal with that very responsibly and appropriately. And I think the one thing that I had the opportunity to do, and as Brian mentioned, Tualatin was there to back us up. And as I understand it, we have the two on the graveyard shift, and one was already dealing with a DUI. And so we had one person to respond, and clearly with what I heard was going on there, he needed help. And that gave me the opportunity with the few neighbors that I've talked about it with to talk about staffing and what happens in Sherwood and those relationships that we have with the adjacent law enforcement units. The one thing, and Brian, you were up during it, did Washington County roll too, or were they engaged? Because I didn't see any Washington County when I was out there.
It was just Tualatin.
Okay. So anyway, it was just one of those opportunities to talk with neighbors about the department and give them some insight because of my involvement here, that helped them understand what was going on and why there was Tualatin units packing our street that morning. So anyway, and I just I want to thank Rich for his comments. I think those are really appropriate. And Bob's, as we start getting close to the election, there's going to be a lot of stress on all of us, but the frontline people are going to be need to be in our thoughts and prayers as they address whatever's going to happen, unfortunately. So that's all I have, Ralph.
Okay. Thanks, Chris.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
This is probably as good a time as any. I'm sure that not everybody knows what was going on. We haven't put out any release or anything. So there was an underage party that occurred at a house that night. And sometime around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, something like that, there was a conflict that arose out of two attendees, and it ended in a stabbing. One of them pulled a knife and inflicted injury, non-life-threatening injury on another young person. So these are all underage juveniles, and so that's what the massive response was about. And Chris, I appreciate your using that opportunity to talk to your neighbors, because the reality is, while these things are not nightly occurrences, they do happen. And it is more frequent than we would like to admit, where we have two officers on, somebody gets a drunk driver, or the officers are both dealing with a domestic disturbance, and a call like this will come in and one of them will have to leave, and then we rely on mutual aid. So imagine on that night, the problem that I have with this from a police chief perspective is, imagine what happens if Tualatin was dealing with a stabbing or some kind of an incident of their own that night, and our officer says, I need help, and there's no, if it's a busy night everywhere, there may not be help to show up. Yeah. So again, not something that happens often, and that's a good thing, but it would only take that to happen one time for us to really be in a pickle and for folks to be in a bad situation. So that's why, among many, many other reasons why, we've worked with the City Council and Budget Committee, and there's a commitment by the Council and Budget Committee to increase our staffing. Our goal is to eliminate those times when there's only two people on. We won't get there next week or probably even next year, because it takes time to get people hired and trained and to get things implemented. But as you know, as well as those other positions we've talked about, the additional detective that we've added, additional SROs that we want to add down the road, we certainly need to make sure that our patrol schedule is strong enough so that we can have ample resources on the road. Our minimum is 2, so that's what we have to have on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We are not at a place yet, and I want to be clear about this, where we need more than 2. 2 is not a great number, but it is sufficient enough of the time that we do not need to go to 3. But we are probably not very far away from going to 3. And it's just, as I've said before many times, it's just simple math. You add one more body, that means you increase that to 3. It's not just a body. 1 equals 0.75. So in order to have one more, you got to have 2. So this is a journey to make sure that we are appropriately staffed as the community continues to grow, and we have the appropriate resources so that when somebody in a neighborhood has a crisis like this and calls 911, we have the appropriate resources to show up. We're always going to have mutual aid agreements. We're always going to be able to rely on our partners. But the simple fact of the matter is it's not their job to cover our calls for us. That's our job. So anyway, so that's what happened. So everybody's up to speed on that.
Chief, I have a follow-up. When this happens, like at 2 or 3 in the morning, and you got a shift change at 6 or 7, is that right?
Yes.
Would you call anybody in earlier, like a supervisor or something, or you don't do that?
Actually, that night we did. We had a supervisor that came in and was scheduled to come to work at 6. They came in at 4. They were the on-call sergeant, so when they got the phone call, they suited up and drove in. And we would, depending on the circumstances, potentially call the next shift in early to manage other calls, right? So the other thing to keep in mind, which some people may not realize, is, oh, okay, you've got this call and you need to have enough people on the call to manage it. Yeah, but the water keeps rolling down the creek, right? And so there could be other calls that are coming in that we need to respond to. Somebody needs to respond to. If they're non-priority, non-emergency, we can make them wait a while. But how do we know that a domestic disturbance call isn't going to come in, halfway through that call? So again, this is the challenge of running a 24-hour operation that requires a minimum number of people. And then it's complicated by the fact that we're emergency responders, we're first responders. So the work we do is not production. We can't just say, well, we'll slow production down and it may hurt, but we just don't have that option. We've got to be there and got to be able to respond to the calls. And in like fashion, we helped Tualatin when they needed, or we helped Tigard or King City or Washington County. So that mutual aid goes both ways.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Laurie, you have anything for us?
I do. So I would like to take a moment to welcome the latest member of the Sherwood Police Foundation board, Mr. Ralph Lohman, joined the board tonight. Welcome, Ralph. I also just wanted to give you a brief update. I think last month the chief told us that there was an officer in Tigard who had been spat upon by a man who said he was COVID positive. I figured out that I know that officer, so I checked in with her. She's doing just fine, which made me very happy. And then the last thing I wanted to say was we were talking about giving support to our PD, particularly now. So I just wanted to remind everybody that you too can have some visible support showing in your yard. We have plenty of these signs left. If you want one, I'm happy to give you one. That's what I have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Lori. Moving on to business, police policy review and policy update process explained. And I think that's for you, Chief.
It is. So, a couple quick reminders. Lori, when your background is blurred like yours and mine is, and you hold the sign up, the sign is blurry.
Okay.
So I'm sure everybody knows what the sign said, but I just wanted to let you know.
Okay, well, thank you.
And then, Brian, we're having trouble hearing you, and I think there's something going on with your mic. If it's an external mic, it's maybe giving you some trouble. I don't know. I think you're muted now, but
How's that?
That's
there you
good.
go. Much better.
That's good, Lori.
Is that better?
No, you're still very, very quiet.
Oh, all right. Is that better?
A little better, but
It's my iPad, so maybe you'll have to look at a bit up close to my grill here.
well,
Okay,
We prefer you to be quiet.
I have to say, Mike, whatever you're looking at when you look up like this makes it look like you're looking at Chris because he's right above you in my screen in the Brady Bunch opening.
just so long as you know, Brian, I just want to let you know.
I will say
Okay.
with Teams, I have to wear my AirPods for people to be able to hear me on my laptop, where with Zoom, I don't. People can hear me just fine. So sometimes there's some interactions with Teams that makes it harder for people to be picked up.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, so there's a couple reasons we're going to go through this policy update review or process. One is because it's time to make some updates to policy. So I thought rather than coming in and saying, okay, well, we've got some updates to make, and so here's the new policies, and here's the changes, I thought it might be educational to actually show you how that update process takes place, because you wouldn't know that. And it's actually a pretty interesting process. There's a lot to it. And I think it'll help explain our overall policy system better. And it'll help make more sense to you. So you should have 3 documents that were included in your packet and emailed to you, 2 just PDFs and then a copy of a PowerPoint. So what I'm going to do now is go through, I'm going to share my screen, and everybody should be seeing the PowerPoint pop up here pretty quick. And if you see it, please give me a thumbs up so I know. Okay,
Got it.
good.
Nope.
Somebody say no?
Yeah, I don't see it. Right, I'll pull it up.
Okay, so this is how the update process works. And by way of reminder, Lexipol is the provider of our policy system. And it really is a system. It's not a binder. So a lot of you think of a policy manual or a procedure manual. I think a lot of times people think of a manual, a physical manual, maybe a 3-ring binder that's 3 inches thick and you put on the shelf. You could certainly print ours out and do that, but that's really not how it's intended to work, and that's not how it does work. It's really a system. The process of having our policy manual is ongoing and it's never completed. So our policy manual, from the perspective of there's nothing else to do, it's never done, right? It undergoes a continual update process. Laws are always changing. Tactics and techniques are always changing. We're always looking for better ways to do things. So it's never completed. What Lexipol provides for us are policies that are constitutionally and legally sound. They do all the work for us. To have a really effective policy manual, somebody has to do that research. Somebody has to make sure that legal statutes are covered, and the case law is covered, and that the policies reflect that. And that's what Lexipol does for us. It is and just so everybody knows, I will pause at the end of each slide for any questions pertaining to that slide. So this is a secure online platform. Everybody that has access has it through, password protected, just like with other things. So it's web-based, but it's not open to anybody. It's secure. And as I have said before, at least twice a year or more as needed based on legal changes, significant tactical changes, it's going to be updated. So at least twice a year we go through this process. And it's oftentimes it ends up being 3, maybe 4 or 5 times a year, depending on what's going on. Certainly 2020, we've seen multiple updates, and we're clearly not done yet. So again, Lexipol is constantly researching, checking for changes in statute, checking for decisions, case law decisions that come out that may affect our policies. And they're doing that both nationally out of the federal court system and in Oregon for Oregon courts, as well as the Oregon legislature. Okay, questions, Chris?
So my question has to do with the updating, Chief. Is it scheduled that you do it twice a year? And then what threshold is there? Can you give me an example of the threshold where you would actually proceed with something in between a normal scheduled update and when you wouldn't?
So the normal updates occur in June, July, and December, January. So just halfway through at the 2 midpoints as you roll through the year. And the updates will be as simple as we made some grammatical changes all the way to the law has changed, tactics have changed, and so we've modified policies as a result. So that's when those two happen. And then the other updates happen as needed at any point during the year. So for example, the Oregon legislature has passed new laws regarding uses of force by police officers, regarding, collective bargaining things, different things like that. When that happens, if it happens close to the regular update, then they'll push them through during one of those times. If it happens in between those regular updates, they will push them through on their own. Anytime there's what they would consider a critical update or an update to a critical policy like use of force, it's not going to wait. They're going to push that through immediately. So it's really driven by the need. Outside of those two, it's driven by the need and timing.
So to follow up, it's Lexipol that makes those decisions, or is it in concert with some counsel with you?
Lexipol makes those decisions, and they push out updates, and they're recommended updates. Ultimately, the decision on what the policy says rests with me and the process we've established in Sherwood for those policies. And I'll explain that here in a minute. Was there any other questions? Okay. So during the update process, what Lexipol does is they release the updates to us. The first thing that comes out is an email announcement, which you got. And it's obviously that document that has my name on the top with the typical email header. And you'll see it just explains that there's Oregon law enforcement policy updates. And it goes through, you've had a chance to read this, everyone. It goes through and describes where those updates are, what sections of the policies they are, and why they've been updated. And then after that, they will release the second document, which are called release notes. And that's the one that has Lexipol up on the top. Law Enforcement Manual Update, September 2020. And so then again, they go through, they list what those updates are with more detail than was in the email. This is obviously sent out via email as well, but the first email is just an email in the body. This email has this attached. And it just gives you a little bit more detail by chapter broken down about what the updates are. Oftentimes, the updates will include very minor, or what one might say insignificant. In other words, they're not, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but they're not significant update. They could be grammatical, they could be formatting. They could have realized in a certain chapter that some of the headers were out of order. They could have realized that there's repetitive language that needs to be fixed. So it's really kind of, as I said, grammatical and formatting. And oftentimes those updates are applied automatically because they do not change the substance of your policy manual. They're just making some cleanup things. And they will explain that and say, chapter 1022 contains some updates for grammatical language and different things like that. And it'll be applied automatically. More often, or most of the time, where those are applied automatically are in a section where there has not been any agency customizing. So we have the ability in any section of this policy to go in there and customize it for our agency specifically. And so anytime they update that, it could affect that customization. So those automatic updates usually will only take place in a section that hasn't been modified. And I would say probably easily 85% to 95% of our policy manual has not been touched. It's my philosophical approach that we subscribe to Lexipol. We trust them as our policy experts. They have all the attorneys working. They have all the research being done. If they recommend something, they're in that business. They're the experts for a reason. And unless it needs to be changed to fit our department specifically or to fit something in the city specifically, we're going to accept their language. And so just so you know, most of our policy has not been, we've not made custom agency customizations to it. So once Lexipol does that, what I do then is review the release notes, just as you've had an opportunity to do. I go through there, I read them, find out what their changes are being made, find out what updates are being made, and then I have a couple different options. My first option is I can update or accept the update in its entirety. That will happen as I explained. If it's a simple update, there's no customization, I will generally accept it without question because, again, I trust them. They have the experts working on it. And unless I see something that's clearly weird, I will accept it. Okay, so that's my first option, is I can accept it completely. Second option is I can reject it completely. And when that happens, it's almost always because we've customized the language, as I explained, in a certain section. And I have a perfect example for that. In the policy that covers personal appearance standards, we allow facial hair, right? We also allow tattoos so long as they're not offensive in any manner. And we have what I would describe a very today type of policy language, progressive with regard to how people can look in uniform and out of uniform, but mostly in uniform. A lot of police departments, you are not allowed to have any facial hair. That is the old school traditional manner, clean shaven. And then the next rung up from that is, well, you can have mustache, but it's got to be very short, very tight. Then maybe goatees and so on and so forth. No piercings, some piercings, no tattoos visible in uniform, some tattoo, right? So there's a lot of variation in there. So that would be a chapter that would be an example of if they updated that and I just accepted the update, we would lose our language because it resets it. So I can either reject that, or then in that same chapter, the third option is I could modify the update, which means I could accept some of it and edit some of it so that it kept with the language that we had. So those are the three options that I have when I get the updates from Lexipol. Any questions on this slide? Megan.
My question is on your actual email that you sent out. Are you going to go through the body of that?
No.
Or, okay, can I ask my question then?
No, we're not going to do that tonight. So what I wanted to cover tonight is how the update process works. And so that once you knew how it works, I'm going to go through the update process. And then what we'll do next month is we'll go through the actual policies that have been updated. And some of it will be repetitive. There's updates that are in the use of force policy. There's some, a few other updates. So I wanted you to have that in front of you, but I didn't want to, we'd be here for 3 hours if we did everything. But I thought it was more important to make sure you understood how the process actually worked. So if I came like I have before and said, yeah, some of these have been updated, whatever, and you're left thinking, well, what do you mean updated? What is that? Well, this is how that works. Any other questions on that slide? Okay. So when I actually log in and go into the manual, that is what I see. And that is a screenshot I took the other day of these updates. So these are the updates that are waiting for me. There's one critical policy update available, and I can tell you that that's the use of force. It's as a result of new state law, changes in the legislature. Now, we had already gone in and made some of those changes ahead of this update process. And so what I will do is I suspect, I'll have to go in there and look at it, but I suspect the language is going to be the same as where we're at now. So I'll probably accept that update because I modified our language because it needed to be modified, and I didn't want to wait for what the legislature would or wouldn't do. It needed to be modified. We needed to take care of chokehold and some other stuff. But now Lexipol has caught up. Once the legislature finished their work, Lexipol has finished their research. They've now caught up. And so now we can go in there and have that done officially. And then the other one, 5 major. So that's the language they use, critical major policy updates. And then there's a little statement down there that basically says what I just explained to you, that updates can be automatically applied to any section where there's no custom language. So we can choose to just say, yeah, just go ahead and update that chapter because we don't have any special language in there. And the system knows where we have custom language. Any questions? Okay, so when I open those 2 message bars, that's what I see. The critical policy update is in fact in chapter 300, use of force. And you have that information in those release notes that I shared with you. So you can actually see in preparation for next month what changes they're suggesting. And now that we've already gone through chapter 300 with you all a couple months ago, hopefully some of that language will make sense. And then we'll go through that update next month and it'll all come together. Okay, I see how this works. And then the 5 major policy updates, you can see what chapters those are in. And they're important. They're important policies, but they're not what lexical determines critical. Now, the other thing that I'll point out under the 5 majors, you see the little check boxes next to some of them. 1026, 1000, and 612 have check boxes. The reason the first 2 check boxes are there is because we have not modified any of that language. So if I click on those check boxes while I'm in the system, click, those will be applied automatically, which is exactly what I'll do because, again, I'm trusting Lexipol. There's nothing specific or unique to us in there. We're going to follow their recommended policy language, which is based on law and best practice. 612 Brady material, I know that that's a brand new policy. It does not currently exist. So that's why it has a checkbox, because there's no custom language because it's brand new. So I will probably check on that and say, yeah, we'll take it. And then since it's a brand new policy, they always ask you twice to make sure you're accepting a brand new policy. But that's brand new language that they're putting in the policy manual. Any questions about this slide? Okay. Cruising right along. So once I actually go in the system and I say, okay, this is policy 300, there's use of force, there's a critical update here. And I click on that chapter and it opens up. I tell it I want to update, I want to edit the policy, and this is the screen that comes to me. And you can see that it's a side-by-side comparison. Here's what the language is now on the left. Here's what the new language is now in red line and blue text, so you can see what's been deleted, what's been added. So that makes the process for me very simple to go through and say, oh, okay. And so I wanted to show you that's what I see. And then you can see what those choices are. I can accept. If I click that button, new language goes in. If I click this, it goes away and it stays the way it was. If I click compare, it's going to actually give me a, it's very, very similar to this, but it shows it in a PDF format instead of a web-based format where I can compare what the changes are and look for custom language that we've put in there. So again, as I said before, when we went in, when we went in several months ago and said, you know what, we need to make some changes to policy and modify our language on chokeholds and de-escalation, some of those other things. We did that to get ahead of the curve. We knew full well that there was probably some legislative changes, but even if the law never changed, it was the right thing to do. So we wanted to change our policy. Now it's become a matter of law. And so Lexipol, while they may have recommended updates to the policy, their updates now are based on new legal standards. And so that's what these updates are going to show. So again, I will accept these because it gets us where we need to be, and it's the actual recommended language that Lexipol has, which is now in keeping with where we want to be with regard to chokeholds and some of those different kinds of things. If I discover, in fact, that some of the language isn't where I want to be, then I won't accept that part of the update. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? So again, wanted you to see what I see when I go in there. This is how this works. Okay, now I have to do that for every chapter. And if on the release notes document, you'll notice on this document right here with Lexipol up on the top, the release notes, it's only a few pages long. There have been updates that have been multiple pages, and the policy, maintaining the policy can be a very time-consuming process. There have been times in the past when I have gone through and done the updates, and it's literally taking me hours, 4, 5, 6 hours over the course of a couple days, because you can only stare at the stuff for so long before you need to take a break. This one isn't too bad, but it's still probably going to take me, I would say, on these a couple hours to go through, because again, I need to read the language, make sure I see what's there, make sure it keeps with where we want to be, where the community wants us to be. So once that process is done, And as I click accept, as I said, it goes through and it runs its electronic checks. When it's completed, then I go and I click the button that says release. And what that does is that releases the brand new policy to the department members via an email. Every member of the department will get an email that says, attention, basically, the policy manual has been updated in the following areas. Now, not everything gets updated, right? Out of those 10 chapters, right now I think we've got two, if I remember right, 3 or 4 chapters that are getting updated. So the email will tell them, here's where the policy's been updated. Chapter 300, use of force, chapter so on and so forth. They will get that email. That's their notice that there's been changes to the policy manual. One of the policies we have requires department members to be responsible for what the policy says. And so when they get that email, the responsibility is then on them to log into the manual, the policy manual. And as they go through the chapters, kind of like the table of contents, it'll show, they've already been told, but it'll show, there'll be an icon that says updated language. They click on that. The new language pops up in a message box. They read the new policy, and then there's a button on the bottom that says acknowledge. And it says, by clicking this, I acknowledge that I've read the policy, I'm familiar with the policy, and it's my responsibility, blah, blah, blah. They click that. So that creates a record of accountability for us that they're aware of what that policy is. And again, that's a requirement that they're to do. I have to do that. When I go in and look at the policy, it'll show the same list and I have the same acknowledgements, even though I'm the one that changed them. So one thing I wanted to add, in some bigger departments, and maybe even some the same size or smaller, there's people whose job it is to do the policy. It could be a deputy chief, a program manager, whatever, that manages those updates and manages that process. In Sherwood, that's me. Obviously, with our size and our resources, we don't have the luxury of having program managers and those kinds of folks to do those things. So that falls on me, which it doesn't have to be that way. We can accomplish what we want to accomplish, but just so everybody knows, that falls on me. Now, our policy manual is available electronically, both on their desktops, they can get to it, but more importantly, they can get to it on their cell phones. So every department member, every officer, sworn officer, has a department issued cell phone. And on that cell phone, if I can find it, there is an app and an icon. And on mine, it's this one right up here in what would be to you the top left, I guess. And so if I click on that,
You have a blurred background, so we can't see that.
I know. Is that there you go. So I don't expect you to read it, but you can see that the policy manual has popped up. So that's there you go. Whoop, too far. So the options it gives me are to view manual, acknowledge policies, and so I can do everything that I need to do from my cell phone as well. So that it's not something they have to come into the office to do. Okay, we have a question, Chris.
So, Chief, I understood and I looked ahead, as I have been doing since I was in school, and saw the acknowledgement in the PowerPoint. But the question I have is, with the shift briefings or roll call, whatever you guys call them, does the sergeant or whoever's leading that go over this stuff too, or is it just strictly on the members of the department to review it online and acknowledge it?
It's on the members of the department. So, and that's really the best and most accountable system there is you put the onus on the employee And this is just not unlike anything else, right? You hire good folks, you give them the tools and the resources they need, and you expect them to do a good job. And part of it is we expect them to stay up to date and current on what the policy manual says. So that's not to say that a sergeant may not sit down in those briefings and say, hey, everybody, remember, you got your email. There's some updates out there, so make sure you go in and acknowledge them. But it would be far too time consuming for a sergeant to go through every one of those. It's just incumbent upon the officers to do that. If they have questions, they come to their sergeant, they come to one of the captains, they come to me and say, hey, this doesn't make sense. Why is this way or whatever? And then we look at it. Or, hey, I think there was a mistake made here. This says 24 hours. I thought it was supposed to be 72 hours. Oh, you're right. Grammatical typo, whatever, and then we can fix it. But Lori.
Do they have a finite amount of time, the officers, to get in and look at the updates and acknowledge them?
There's no defined set time where, okay, from 1:30 to 2:30 is policy time. No, they just, within their scheduled work shift, over the course of a couple days, they need to get in there, and once the updates and the new policies are released, they just need to get in there and get them looked at and acknowledged. Again, we don't have the luxury to be able to set that kind of time aside. There could be calls holding, there could be other things, and it's their job to manage their time and make sure they get those things done. And it doesn't have to happen. You know, you've got to have those. If we can go in and check and see who's acknowledged and who hasn't. And so we don't go in and check in 24 hours and say, you haven't done your job. I mean, it's just, they need to know what the policy is. And so depending on if they were off for a couple days or whatever, not everybody's going to have it done at the same time. Megan, did you have a question?
That was it. Is there a way that you could check and follow up, like, oh, in a month, this sergeant hasn't done his policy duty updates?
Yes. Any other questions? Okay. Any questions about the questions?
I have one. Is Lexapol, we've talked about it, but is it something you brought to Sherwood? Is it something that is just industry standard for police departments nationally? Is it new and upcoming?
So there we go. So there's several parts to that question. Lexapol has been around for, give me a minute here, about 15 to 20 years. That is a really rough guess, and I don't know. I know while I was still at Tualatin as a captain, we implemented Lexapol there. So you know, I've been here almost 13 years, so it's going to be the other side of 15 years, and it was in existence before then, but it started down in California, and the company is based out of California, and it started to spread into other states. So it's been around quite a while, and it's been taking a pretty strong foothold in Oregon. I would not say that it's at some place where I could say that Lexapol is industry standard. I'm absolutely comfortable that the language they use and the policy that they develop is industry standard, but using them as a vendor probably isn't. They're used extensively, but I don't know that it would be a high enough percentage to say that they're industry standard. And then I think the other question was, did I bring it here? Yes. When I took over here in February of 2008, we had a sit-on-the-shelf policy manual. What I mean by that is it was a hard copy document, It had no electronic backing. In fact, we did not have a complete electronic version of it that we could find. And in 2008, it was 12 years old. So imagine how any industry, but certainly policing, would have changed in 12 years. I know Bob has spent considerable time dealing with procedural and policy type manuals, and in 12 years, you might as well just throw it in the campfire. And so what we discovered was that it was not only outdated, it was inadequate. It didn't have the chapters that it should have had. In fact, I can tell you that the officers were carrying tools, force options that were not even covered in policy. And we discovered that probably inside the first 6 months I was here. Commander Jim Reed came into my office and said, hey, you know, this incident happened. The officer had this and used this. And he said, and guess what? And I said, well, at this point, anything's possible. And he goes, yeah, we have no policy on that. So it was, and that from a risk liability perspective is just absolutely, just get the checkbook out and hopefully they don't ask for too much, because it's not good. So we did the best we could immediately to try to bolster the manual that we had. And in fact, what was comical about that is it was a manual from 96, like I said, 12 years old. And as I looked at it, I thought, this looks familiar. And I took a closer look and I realized it was the same manual that we had in Tualatin in 1996. It was purchased from an attorney that developed it and sold it as, and you bought it like you would buy a book at Barnes and Noble. And there was nothing else ever done to it. It was your job to keep it, you know, add or subtract or whatever. And I think at the time there was, remember those little square plastic discs, the 3.5 floppies, but they weren't floppy. I think you got one of those with everything on it. And we certainly had one in Tualatin that we made updates, and but we couldn't find a complete copy of that in Sherwood. So I kind of laughed at the time. I thought, my goodness, this is 2008, and this is the same policy that we had in 96 in Tualatin, because obviously several agencies probably bought it. So it was not a good situation. And so we did what we could. And I told the city manager and folks at the time, I said, we got to fix this and we need to go to Lexipol. It's the future. It's where we need to be. And there was an agreement. And in fact, we got a grant through CIS, our insurance carrier at the time, to help us pay for the initial assessment, or not assessment, but the initial subscription and membership, whatever you want to call it, the initial setup fee for Lexipol. And then you go through a very, very, very thorough survey process where they ask you pretty much everything you can imagine about your organization. Do you do this? Do you do that? What do you call this person? The person that is in charge of a shift, what do you call them? Do you have any airports in your community? Do you have any landing strips nearby? Do you have any navigable waterways? Do you? So that they can customize the policy for you and know what they need to put in and include and not include. So your policy identifies shift supervisor as sergeant, because that's the rank we have, as opposed to corporal or watch commander or different terminology. So yeah, I think that answered all the questions that Megan had. Any others? Okay, very good. Next month, we'll get back into policies. We'll look at some updates that were included in this, and we'll get back on track. I'm committed, just so you all know, to not have a repeat of last month. I thought it was a simple enough stack of policies, but it ended up taking way too long, and I apologize for that. So just It may be a longer haul. We'll get through it, and but we'll try to do it in smaller bites.
Thanks, Chief. Next up, did somebody have a? Okay. Next up, traffic safety update. And so we have the Traffic Safety Committee liaisons that are going to give us an update.
Mike, you want to go?
Sure.
Or I can do it. Go ahead.
I'll start out. Feel free to jump in. The committee's been busy. We've had a number of issues come up. I kind of chuckled to myself because, you know, I came from an industry where when a board decided to make a decision, if you were staff, you were making phone calls to start the process before that meeting ended. And we're dealing with a city bureaucracy here, and things move a little bit slower, even when we've decided that something needs to happen. But we've added a stop sign up in the Sherwood View Estates. That's off to the city manager for approval. We've turned down a couple of things, which I'm sure the citizens will be excited when they hear that news, that their request has been turned down. And then we've got a number of other issues that are pending that are being reviewed, and a lot of data being gathered before we make a final decision on whether those aspects will be approved or disapproved. But it's frankly, it's a very interesting committee, so I'm enjoying it. Chris?
Yeah, I just add that the traffic sign that we finally recommended took 2 meetings to go through it, and we ended up after the first meeting having the Captain Carlton saying that their recommendation was to put something there. And you got to realize this is just a T intersection in a neighborhood. It's not a collector or anything. So, but the city engineer, based on that point and in that neighborhood, there was other streets that were more of a collector. But staff did put out some of those street count things, and what they found is people were moving pretty good around this T intersection. A third of them over 20 miles an hour. So it was clear that for public safety, it was justified to do the investment. And that's the neat thing, and why I share it is the fact that we've got the tools to do the assessment and go out there and collect more data versus just the gut check and looking at maps and stuff like that. So I think the other thing, several of the requests have been in locations dealing with pedestrian crossings with new construction in the works, and we don't have the new high school engaged, so we put some of that stuff off to see if the problem's still there after the construction, or what kind of traffic on Sunset up near the Y and Middleton we're going to have. So it's been a good process, and I'm not going to make next week's meeting, but I would, Chief, like to hear if we've gotten any feedback from those people that we've made decisions on their applications, complaints, whatever we want to call them. So, but I commend the city council for setting this up, because I think we're helping the city come up with good solutions to the problem.
And I will say that just one of the hot button areas right now seems to be the roundabout at Langer Farms. So we'll be talking about that in the future.
Okay. Is that it, fellas?
Yep.
Okay.
Counselor news. Kim?
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, I really love that we use Lexapol, and that's an easy way to keep our policies up to date. That was pretty scary to hear that we had a manual from 1996 in 2008. So I didn't know that. And also the Traffic Safety Committee, excuse me, that's really exciting. I'm glad to see that finally up and taking off and things happening with that. So I know City Council has had some work sessions on that roundabout at Langer Park, so it'll be interesting to see what Traffic Safety Committee says about that. I know what we've thought might be a good idea is turning it into the one lane idea, but so that will be a good thing. I kind of feel really tired tonight, and maybe I feel like the students and the teachers feel right now during distance learning, because most of us counselors spent the last 2 days in what would normally have been a conference, League of Oregon Cities conference, but it was all online. So we've been in front of our screens for 2 days, popping in and out of classes and sessions and this and that. Couple sessions, there was a lot of work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I joined a broadband session and an economic development session, all three things that our council is working on right now. So a bunch of our counselors, we ended up in some of the same sessions, I think probably because that is what some of our focuses are on council right now. Next meeting is Tuesday, and we actually don't have a regular business meeting. We're only having a work session, and it is with CFM, our lobbyists, and they will be going over the 2021 legislative agenda for the long session that begins in January. So they'll try to tell us what's coming up and ask us things that we think they should be working on for us and whatnot. So, and then the long-awaited work session on December 1st. So we had a bunch of citizens come back and ask us again. There was some social media conversations, and we received some emails about the possibility of having chickens in Sherwood again. So we will once again be talking about chickens. Now, I haven't been on council when we talked about chickens. It was the year before, but I did attend all those sessions when they talked about them. So this will be an interesting conversation again to see if there's any palate for changing and actually allowing chickens. I think they would be allowed not in very many areas of Sherwood because most homeowners associations aren't going to allow them. I know like Woodhaven, no chickens. Well, that's a huge part of Sherwood. So we'll be talking about lot sizes probably and that kind of stuff. So that is about all I have for tonight. November 3rd, somebody already showed your ballot. They came in the mail. I am one of those people that actually votes on November 3rd because I miss going to the polls. I'm from California, so I actually dropped mine in on November 3rd, and I feel like I voted on voting day. But get your ballots in. We got a mayor. Well, we don't really have a mayor race because it's uncontested. We've got city councilors. We've got representatives. We got a ballot measure going on in Sherwood. So get your ballots in. Make sure you vote.
I have a question for you, Kim.
Can it be easy?
Well, I hope so. City girl here, not country girl, really. Do chickens draw rats?
I'm city. I'm a city girl. I'm not a country girl. There's some concerns about that I know was brought up the last time in 2015. There were people that came and said that. There was concerns about smells. There was concerns about, I don't know, some sort of diseases. So I don't really know that answer.
Okay. Well, I have been noticing, I and a bunch of my neighbors have been talking about this because we have been noticing that with all the construction, there are a lot of rats these days. And rats climb trees. We figured that out too. We saw that.
Oh.
Yeah. So just wanted to know if chickens would draw them into.
We'll look into that.
Oh. Thanks.
I think chickens are just, they're good on a plate. Otherwise, like, they're gross. And Kim, living in Woodhaven, I cannot imagine our HOA even entertaining it. I mean, for God's sakes, I get a letter if, our Christmas lights are up January 2nd.
Oh no,
So-
Woodhaven already has a no chicken policy, so there won't be chickens in Woodhaven. But,
Cordon bleu, yes, please. Other than that, and they're loud in the morning. I'm a morning person, but for God's sakes.
well, no
Someone-
roosters. There
No,
wouldn't
no,
be
no.
roosters.
There is a rooster in Woodhaven. I don't know if it's, an orphan or not, though.
Well, we are a complaint-driven city, so nobody would go look into
Too
it
long.
unless somebody submitted a complaint, which kind of brought up this whole chicken discussion. But if anybody has any feedback they want to give to counselors, email us and give feedback. So, does anybody else have any other questions besides chickens?
I was just going to say, Megan, the chicken you hear probably is an app.
My husband has that
maybe.
app.
You're kidding. My God. So
My husband has a rooster ring tone for his alarm clock. So yeah.
Because it was every morning at the same time on my running route it was when I hit I'd come down Fitch and I'd turn left. No. Yeah, Fitch, and then I'd turn left onto Pinehurst. And I was like, there's a chicken here and it's by the wetland, so I just figured there was a rooster, hanging out in the wetland. But I bet you it was someone's alarm clock with an open window. Thanks, Rich.
Boy, I'm glad we solved that one.
3 years. 3 years.
I just wanted to let you know that as city councilor, we really deal with some very exciting issues.
Okay.
So I'd like to add on the comment about ballots, being a campaigner, just so you know, the good campaigns go and check who's turned stuff in. And if you don't want calls or mail showing up, put them in early, and that will drop some of your calls that you receive or the mail that you get to recycle that comes in. So just one little thing with vote by mail, we can campaign wise, we can just target who hasn't turned their stuff in.
But I just let them keep mailing things and keep spending their money. Anything else for Councilor Young?
Okay, staff reports.
Okay, it's me again. I am not a fowl expert, but Lori, I would say that chickens likely don't draw rodents, but the chicken food, just like dog food or any other kind of food, is what would draw rodents. That's my first staff report item. My second staff report item is I want to make sure Bob does not feel any connection with the stop sign needing to go in close to where he lives. It has nothing to do with your driving at all that we are aware of.
I appreciate that, Chief. I've been sitting here thinking, okay, living up here in Sherwood Estates, where is that stop sign going? And I don't see people speeding around here, and I've yet to come up with a location. So I'm looking forward to that, unless Mike, you or Chris can give me a street-corner.
Denali and Whitney, Bob.
Denali and Whitney.
Yeah, because Denali's been punched through, so it's seeing more. So as you're coming up Denali and you're approaching Whitney, that intersection now, or very soon, we'll have a stop sign there.
Okay. A lot of big construction trucks every day.
But Bob,
where is this neighborhood?
Bob, I think there was a video of you going through that intersection, though. I'm just saying.
We don't have any red light cameras up here to my knowledge.
Sherwood Estates is west of Murdoch, Baker Road, Sunset.
Yep.
Okay, next and final comment is much more serious. Brian alluded to coming and helping us with training yesterday. So that was part 2 of our racial justice training. We've called it a couple different things, but we had part 1 which included videos and a rather robust, productive conversation as a department. A couple months ago, this was part 2, where Brian came in with Jimmy and other gentlemen, and they spent an hour with half of our department talking about their experiences and talking about racial justice and what policing is to them, and giving the officers a chance to have some dialogue with them. Very effective training, was received very well, and so that's the part 2 that I wanted to plug in. We've already had, the entire department's already gone through some implicit bias training, and so next week we'll have the rest of the department will go through that. So that's what that training was about. And then also I thought of something else. Bob, you mentioned the mental health training. That's commonly referred to as CIT training, crisis intervention. And several of our officers, I do not believe every one quite yet, but several of our officers have gone through that training. And in fact, we have one officer that has gone through enough of that training that he's now working with the Washington County Mental Health Response Team on a backup basis. So when one of their deputies has time off or is sick, then our officer can fill in with the clinician and fill that spot. So it's, as you can well imagine, it's 40 hours. So that's a pretty good hit on an agency to try to get everybody through there. But
yeah.
There's shorter versions as well, and so we're trying to get as much training to our officers on that as we can possibly do. So it equips them to be able to respond and know how to deal with and navigate their way through folks that are facing mental challenges or disabilities of all sorts. But I think it's specifically how it plays out for us are people that are just have a mental health issue, either by way of a diagnosis or by way of a combination of maybe substances and different things like that. So very, very effective training. Focuses on how to communicate, focuses on crisis communication. And, the biggest component of that is it teaches officers that when you show up and yell, you're likely going to get a shutdown response. It's not going to work. And so you show up and you talk and you try to identify and relate and figure out what's going on. And then of course it goes beyond that to actual resources and so on. So very, very good training. And if there's no other questions for me, I think that's all I have.
Any other questions for Chief? Okay. Angie, do we have any citizen comments for tonight?
No, we did not receive any citizen comments.
Okay. Well, then, unless somebody has other business that they would like to bring to the Police Advisory Board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
A second.
I second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Good night.
Bye.
Good to